live, and I'm live. Greetings, hello Sean, and hello to everybody out there in YouTube land. I think we got it working fine this time tonight. Can you, somebody let me know if you can hear and see me okay? Excuse me. Or can anybody hear me at all? Let's see, I've got a green light down here. I think we've just got yourself there, Sean. Can you hear me okay? Hello. Howdy, y'all. Can you hear me, Babs? I'm hoping people can hear me anyway. We'll soon find out. As much as you have your computer gadgets and your guidelines down here, the feedback isn't always the best thing. Let's hope you can hear me okay. Loud and clear, Babs. Thank you very much. It's the one thing you kind of need a bit of feedback on, isn't it? You don't know if you're talking to yourself or excuse me. How are we all tonight? Are we all keeping well? Getting home early from work, Babs. Tell you what I'll do is all's well. That's good to hear. I'll start doing a wee bit of chatting, but once again, folks, Sean, by the way, I was looking up that science fiction writer you were talking about, and I haven't read anything by him at all. Though a couple of the book's titles I've kind of recognized. So that's the cyberpunk author you're chatting about. Minus this kitten harassing me. I'm expecting my two dogs back into the house at any minute. And may get assaulted quite loudly by them, I'm afraid. So just in case. I've got a Jack Russell and a German Shepherd Border Collie cross, and a pair of Hallions. I hope you're all keeping well tonight anyway. And we thought just keep it up with these wee videos and doing a wee bit of a question and answers on them. So this is the video tonight, was all the points. I think we were talking about it yesterday, the points of absolute identity really between Samuel Butler's Erewhon and Frank Herbert's Dune series. And I think I was saying to a few of you whenever I started doing my research into Frank Herbert, that reading Erewhon really just sent everything sideways for me. And I particularly took very detailed notes of Erewhon and was astounded at how much of Frank Herbert's Dune is there. And really, but what's fascinating about this book really is it's way ahead of its time. And I'm not too sure on this, but I think I say it in the video actually, so I've probably done some work on it and referenced it, but I believe Erewhon is the first book that really looks at machine intelligence. So I think it came out in 1872 anonymously. So it's very ahead of its time, and it is in one of these kind of I suppose we have a range of science fiction books that look at looks at our own society by stepping into someone else's, if you like. So it's in that tradition of those kind of satires like Gulliver's Travels and so on. And it is a good read. We don't find out, by the way, in case anybody hasn't read Erewhon, I mentioned that its narrator is called Higgs. You don't find out his name in the first book at all. So you only find out he's called Higgs in Erewhon Revisited. Excuse me. So, and which is the sequel to Erewhon. And I think it is interesting. Somebody was talking about the Frank Herbert. Somebody asked me yesterday about what I thought about Brian Herbert, and the way that Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson have taken, I suppose, the Dune universe and finished off Frank's Dune series by those two books that put an end to the story, and then they've kept churning out a various bunch of books. And I was just thinking about it. It was kind of interesting that whenever we get to the point looking at the hero, the hero in science fiction that Frank Herbert's kicking off against is what we call the Van Vottian hero. And I don't know if you know this, but Kevin J. Anderson also writes in the in the same world as Van Vought's kind of slam. So there's a connection there between something that Frank was railing against and that type of fiction being sort of continued. I just thought it was a bit interesting. Has anybody got any questions for me then before I keep rambling on? Whether it be tonight's video or Dune in general or the Dune movie or science fiction in general, fire away, please, if you've got something for me. I'll grab a quick slurp of coffee for the precious bodily fluids. Did Paul consider taking on the Santrout skin to prolong his life in order to impose the golden path for humanity? I don't think it comes up at all. Randomity with Paul. I think that's a thing very much with Leto. But I'm honestly, again, a long time since I've read the books, but I think that's very much a Leto thing, and it's quite interesting. I suppose we wonder why does Leto do it, and I suppose the symbiosis is one thing. Within the literary reviews that we have within the series, we talk about there's I think it's Marie Noelle Zinder's The Moi Po of Leto Atreides, which I think looks at the whole second skin thing from a psychological point of view. I think it's got something to do with DDA Anzu, but there is that in one of the episodes. If you catch the reference, you'll with the footnote, it might lead you to something there. But no, I don't. It's wouldn't that? And I wonder, is just would Paul even see that in the Golden Path? Oh, I could adapt. I could take on the skin of a worm and sort out my problems. Sean saying, yes, I did enjoy The World of Null A by Van Vogt. Is there a classical connection to prescience as a curse? It's not quite the story of Cassandra. Right, Cassandra complex. There's a lot of things like this in the classical world. There's prescience, yes. Cassandra, for anybody who doesn't know, is the daughter of Priam, and she is cursed. She's a priestess of Apollo who if I remember correctly, is a priestess of Apollo who one of his spheres of influence is oracles and so on. So her story is that she always can see the future, but is cursed by the fact that no one will ever believe her. So within the Trojan War, it's her that understands that Paris is actually Alexandros, and that Troy will fall, but nobody believes her. And Cassandra is actually taken as a spoil of war by Agamemnon in the return from the Trojan War. So the whole end to Agamemnon involves Cassandra, and I believe that she's murdered by Clytemnestra and Aegisthus as well, which is it was the matter to do with Agamemnon's murdered by his wife for sacrificing his daughter to start the Trojan War. So that's who Cassandra is, and the Cassandra complex is being able to see the future, but nobody will actually believe you. So there's lots of stuff like that in the classical world, Sean. There's paradoxes there quite a lot. For example, one of my favorite stories from the classical world is if you look at the constellations of the big dog and the little dog, Ursa Major, or not Ursa Major, sorry, Canis Major and Canis Minor. In Greek mythology are the dog Laelaps and the Chimisian vixen. The story goes that the Chimisian vixen is a monster that's running around Boeotia, and they're kind of like divine animals, I suppose. But the Chimisian vixen is destined to always escape what chases it. And the dog Laelaps has a particular attribute, which is that it's always destined to catch what it chases. So the gods set Laelaps after the Chimisian vixen. The two animals, because of the paradox, end up wrecking half of ancient Greece. And the gods go, whoa, that's enough, and just set them in stone, turn them to stone, and then set them in as the constellations and the stars. So prescience and particularly paradox. There's all sorts of things in classical mythology, particularly Greek mythology. And it is one of the reasons why I think the monomyth idea, the concept of the monomyth, breaks down, because the idea with that, I suppose, in the systemic thinking of the monomyth is that all myths are the same. No matter where you go around the world, that they have a cultural, there's a paired identity, if you like, that there's a similarity in origin to these tales. With some of the Greek stories, you just know they're just mad as hell, and you will not find, analogs around the world with them. They're bonkers. Some of them absolutely crazy, and you won't really find analogs for them in other cultures. Hi Ninja, hi Ninja, how are you? What essence of the Dune book are you hoping the upcoming movie captures? Oh, that's a good question. Um, I don't know. It's quite interesting, because the one aspect of the Dune book that you need to sell in the film is to make Paul utterly charismatic and to hook. If we need to do the same thing with Paul Atreides, he absolutely needs to hook his audience. Paul Atreides needs to be very believable, charismatic, everything that Frank Herbert set the character up to be. And I think Timothée Chalamet looks exactly the right type of actor to do that. And in fact, I think all of the actors that have played Paul Atreides have all been pretty good at it. They've brought the right thing to it. But let me see. What essence of the Dune book? I'm really hoping that the whole retrograde nature of the society and the technology is present. I think I want to see the Butlerian jihad in effect around in the society. Hello, Holly. Sorry, that's my dogs have arrived. Well, yeah, big sausage. Go on, go play. Huh? Oh. So that would be, and I thought that was a good aspect of the Lynch movie. And I know that I'm pretty sure that's one of the things that I've got a fly on the camera there. Sorry. I think it's one of the things that put people off the David Lynch movie at the time, was that the kind of it has a sort of steampunk kind of feel to it. Some of the technology, which should be right. I think there's a mechanical nature to things. Let me see. Trying to pull something that's not fully developed on the side, maybe. Yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing is if you produce a Dune movie and don't get to Dune Messiah, then are you actually presenting a really dangerous hero to society through film and not delivering the real warning? So it's the problem with Paul Atreides is he is incredibly likable and charismatic, and I suppose depending on how far you've got in the Dune series, changes your opinion of him. Honestly, I'm looking forward to Zimmer's score most. Bob says the music, yeah. I don't know, Hans Zimmer. My kind of the sort of scores that I liked in these type of films are kind of mostly gone these days. But I thought the original Dune movie has great music in it. But I used to, guys like Basil Poledouris, I think, were, in terms of the movie scores, were really good. Yeah, we've got loads of flies here at the minute. I don't know why they're all just coming up and out the window. Oh, doggo, yes, I've got two of them about somewhere. They've left at the minute. They're a right pair of hands. Then it's got the steampunk feeling off beautifully. The sci-fi series, not so much. Yeah, and it's a question of, are you going to make your technology look super advanced for that audience that wants to see cool science fiction tech, and I suppose the whole thing again with the Butlerian jihad is the whole point is that it's not that they don't have technology or get rid of it, but there's a kind of retardation to it. And I always get the fact, especially if you read the appendices, is that there's a point where they can get close to, breaking the convention, I suppose. And it's got the steampunk aesthetic makes sense since miniaturization integrated circuits wouldn't exist. Yeah, there's all sorts of reasons for why we could, but again, I think that was one of particularly the Hunter Seeker. I think in David Lynch's film, and that whole, as you get to see he takes you inside the machine and gets you to see the pendulum. And there is a very nice aesthetic about, I think, all things steampunk. I have to say that there's great attention to detail. So that was one of the things that I thought was quite good. And I even thought the Ornithopters were a bit, had that kind of feel. One of the things I'm not too sure about was the Ornithopters in the new film, and from I suppose an ornithopter is a bird, a ship vehicle that flies like a bird, and they seem to look like insects or dragonflies or something like that to me. But I haven't had a chance to look at them properly, I suppose. And it would be one of those things of how would you design an ornithopter? But we've actually seen some robots lately. If you look on YouTube and on the web, there you'll find them designed to be robots that are like birds, and they have that. They're actually ornithopters, I think. Steven Studio Executive chopped up Lynch's film, basically fired and proposed. I think Grimdark Elven Loremaster. Hello. I was actually commenting the other day. I was wondering why Lynch, if he was so unhappy with the film, and if the studio had pretty much not done much with it, why hadn't he gone back and revisited it? But is it a question that I suppose the original prints and stuff don't exist, maybe. Chopped up Lynch's film, basically fired for post-production. Yeah, I still think the David Lynch film's great. I seem to have got a bit of a thing going here with discussing that. I think we could turn it into a musical experience or a musical cinema experience. Rand Dominy says, I hope the movie captures Herbert's notion of the improvement to the human species in general. People who are evolved and conditioned to be the pinnacle of human achievement. What a piece of work man is, eh? The paragon of animals. Yeah, well, I think that's interesting. I think the David Lynch movie gets that we don't get to see all the things, but what you're looking at within Dune, I suppose, is human evolution on multiple planets that are not Earth. And if you're being born on another planet, that's going to affect your evolution. So and also the developments of the different technologies and the dependency on space in different ways. So I'm actually randomly, one of the things I really want to see is the Guild Navigators. I want to see the spice and the spice. I'm not too sure how that's going to be done. I'm really quite like to look at the different mutations and the different aspects of peoples within the Imperium. Sean says the aspect of that is both how man affects his environment and also how the environmental affects the evolution of man. It's circular feedback loop. Yeah, I suppose one of the big concerns about Dune is its environmental message. We were talking briefly yesterday about the problem with gender swapping the Leah Kynes character in terms of Frank Herbert's warning about heroes coming out of an ecological platform, and assigning that blame to Western man. But the thing is, if you think that Kynes is the poster boy for or poster girl for environmentalism and ecology, then that he's not. He's the warning as well. He gets it badly wrong. So I'm actually concerned that the Kynes character is going to be used as a hey, ecology is good, systemic thinking is good, and I'm concerned that the environmental message might be sent out incorrect, because I think they have got that character slightly wrong. And as much as he is your ecologist and he's the person that educates you in ecology and in Dune, especially in, for example, the banquet scene, he is Herbert does this is Herbert's giving you this character as an example of these dangerous types of people with the systemic thinking and how the Kynes family uses people. So the environmental thing is very much linked to the planet Arrakis itself. Arrakis is your lesson from Frank, really, and he's created this world to give you an idea of how all things are interrelated upon it. I think I caught somebody's video. I'll not say who the other day, but somebody said that the worms are. We use the word. Somebody's been using the terms native to. That the Fremen are native to Arrakis, and the sandworms are native to Arrakis, and I suppose native comes from the word nativity. It's to do with where you're born. So the Fremen are native to Arrakis for several generations, I suppose. But the point is that the worms aren't native, and it takes a bit of work to eke out the ecological thread in all the 6 Dune books. But the worms are a transplanted species, and pretty much all of the indigenous life on Arrakis is dead. It's gone. So all the species that exist there are, as far as I can tell, transplanted, and they're from Earth desert-like environments. So Herbert gives you a good list of them. There's the kit fox, the kangaroo mouse we all love, Moadib, as the jerboa. Pardon me. So there's that aspect of it. The Arrakis is an ecological lesson. And Dune is of sorts an ecological primer. It's not a be all and end all of, hey, this is ecology, but it really is meant to introduce the subject to, I suppose, young adult readers in a certain way at the time that nothing really else had done so. Do you think Brian Herbert's So sorry, very quickly, Grim, Sean, just to finish up on your point, the concern about the cyclical problems, the environment, all of that, and how it's presented. Excuse that fly. And that's I'm very interested to see that. Do you think Brian Herbert's biography on his father, Dreamer of Dune, is worth reading? Grimdark, Elven, Loremaster. Thanks, Grimdark. Yes, absolutely. I've read it a couple of times just really for study purposes, but I read it through once and then got the pen out, if you know what I mean, and then went through and made my notes and got the various things that I needed from it. So absolutely, I think it's a very good read. I don't read many biographies of modern people, to be honest with you. I have read the odd I suppose the biographies that I would have kind of looked at would be things like people like H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard. But the only really sort of my favorite biography is The Devil Drives by Fawn Brodie, which is a biography of the life of Richard Francis Burton, which is definitely worth reading. But otherwise, it's all the ancient biographies I like, Plutarch's Lives and things like that. Sorry, rambling there, Grimdark. Absolutely, I think it's very, very much worth a read. If it depends on if you want to understand a writer. It's we have plenty of Frank's own words. But it's a good insight into him, and it's, I suppose, it's a family, it's a personal biography, and it's backed up there. We've got photos and stories and anecdotes, and plenty of people have contributed, I think, to it. So it's a very insightful book, and I think a lot of people put Frank on a pedestal sometimes, and I think Brian does a good job of humanizing his father, not demonizing him or anything. And I do know they have I think you'll get the sense from the book that they, both him and his brother had a complicated relationship with his father. He's another sister as well. But yeah, it's a good book. And if you're into Frank Herbert, really, then it's going to let you know quite a bit. And I learned a fair bit about him, I suppose, and his upbringing and so on. So we covered some of that in the third episode on our series, which is just a wee quick biography of Frank Herbert. But that book itself would have been a major source of information for it. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if you like Frank Herbert, it's just quite insightful into his life, and there's some good family photos and so on in there. And I enjoyed it. I didn't have I'll put it this way: I had no bother reading it. I tore through it in no time. I suppose that biography is all about if you're interested in the person, Kids calling, be right back, no problem, Babs. And if you'll excuse me, I need to blow my nose, folks, very quickly. I'm going to run off screen here because I'm that loud, but I'll be right back. Oh, there we go. That's better. Oh dear, sorry about that. It's that time of year where we're transitioning from summer to autumn, and it's all that the air pressure, and we're all congested as hell here at the minute. Is I suppose the buzzwords of the day are flies and decongestion. So yeah, absolutely, it's a good read. and it is pretty insightful. There's a couple of other books, I suppose. There's The Road to Dune, I think, which is a collection of bits and pieces with Frank Herbert. And yeah, I suppose a few other books, the Frank Herbert notebooks. I don't know if I have it here somewhere. There's odd things that you can get by Frank Herbert. There you go. What's that? The Notebooks of Frank Herbert is a wee odd one. I don't know if you've ever seen that. And this is pretty much just an awful lot of. I suppose it's a lot of just wit and wisdom of Frank with the illustrations and so on. But I've pretty much read almost everything kind of on or around Frank Herbert. And yeah, he's he's an interesting writer. I think the big four are all quite interesting. Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke and Heinlein's pretty kooky. One part of Frank Herbert's life that is interesting is his friendship with Jack Vance and Paul Anderson with their mutual interest in sailing. That's right. Yeah, and there's quite a wee sort of club of science fiction writers there. And of course, let me see if I can remember his name. Sometimes my memory is a wee bit away with it. A lot of Dune books there. Sorry, bear with me 1 wee second. Who am I looking for here? Heisenberg. Oh, I don't know, to be honest with you. Maker of Dune. There we are. Sorry, I was trying to think of another science fiction writer, but Grimdark. There's a good wee section about the whole, the whole Star Wars, Frank Herbert being gutted by its arrival, and all the different science fiction authors who he says they jokingly formed a club called the We're Too Big to Sue George Lucas Club. So yeah, there's the interactions of other science fiction writers as well, and certainly his household seems to be a place where these guys kind of came to have a bit of a natter and interact and socialize and have fun. My general sense of a lot of these American writers from that time were kind of they met each other quite often and had mutual friendships and so on. So hello, Aqua Baby, how are you? That's good. This is another one of these books. Just again, the maker of Dune. It's probably appearing backwards on the screen there. Apologies for that. I suppose that's just bits and blurbs. You pick up wee things on Frank Herbert through introductions and all, magazines and stuff. And there's some good interviews with him and things like old Omni magazines and things. So you can find him here and there on the web. And I think there's quite a good one with Mother Earth. I think Mother Earth magazine that's archived on the web. You'll find interviews with most of the big four. I think I know Asimov's on there, and I know Frank Herbert's on there too. So, but yes, definitely, it's worth a read. I think apart from the only other biography I've ever read was of Michael York, I think. So there we go. Domini, let's see your copy of the Dune Encyclopedia. No bother. Suppose that'll look backwards too. There we go. The Inud. I've had this forever. It's a lovely book, really nice book, and a real fun book. I suppose everybody's talking about some of the old Dune stuff that's not available. If you're not familiar with the Dune Encyclopedia, it's by sorry, folks. Holly, be here. It's by Professor Wallace E. McNally. Hang on a wee second. Holly, Dolly, be here, look. Sorry, that's not Holly Dolly, that's the other one. That's Evil Noodles. Yeah, Grimdark. It's too bad it's out of print. We get far enough from what lens do you think the new series of Dune media would explore the Ixian culture of technology? How do you make them relevant, relatable? I'll get to that in a wee second. Hi Ninja. Yeah, it's too bad it's out of print, Grimdark. It's I've got a PDF of it and top dollar on eBay. Good to know. Yeah, if anybody wants a copy of it, fire me an email at the station, and it's a PDF of. It's probably your best bet of getting it, to be honest with you, if you can't get a hold of it. Um, yeah, it's one of those things that Frank actually quite liked to give his full stamp of approval, and I think I've commented on it a couple of times on Twitter. And I'm quite new to Twitter, by the way, so on all of that stuff, I only started doing that to really promote these videos. Um, but it's a great addition to the Dune universe and really sort of fleshes out some ideas and mm, has things like the Dune Tarot and stuff in it. And it is an encyclopedia, really, and it's an incredible work of. To be honest with you, it's within the science fiction world and the publishing world. It's really notable as this is really a piece of fan fiction, isn't it? To be honest, and it's of reasonable size and is incredibly detailed. You'll need your reading glasses for this one. Has all sorts of wee illustrations and stuff. It's like a proper encyclopedia. Has quite a lot of the Lady Jessica, for example, and so on. And the detail is, I mean, if you could build a role play game or anything from that, and if you just want to immerse yourself in Frank Herbert's universe, it's just a fun read. You can open it up at a random place, and just like you can with most encyclopedias. Um, but yeah, I think the actions of the Herbert estate against well, C. McNally's Dune Encyclopedia, I think are pretty in the gutter, if you excuse my French. And it seems that it's a matter of controlling your intellectual property, which isn't actually your own. But to shut someone else out like that, I thought it wasn't nice. And I'm one of those people that doesn't do things for money at all. So if money was the result of that, I suppose that action, then so be it. But I suppose it has resulted in you all not being able to go out and buy a new copy, I suppose, or that no publisher will have another run of it. Because I dare say that if you ran the Dune Encyclopedia at the press, you'd sell plenty of copies, to be honest, to Dune fans. Back to High Ninja then. Hoping we get far enough. From what lens do you think the new series of Dune media should explore the Ixian culture and technology, and how do you make them relevant, relatable? Well, the Ixian technology, we have an episode that we're going to hit the development of evolution of technology with the Ixians very shortly, High Ninja, and we cover that quite a bit in the videos. How would the new series of Dune Media show explore Ixian culture and technology? Well, I suppose the main things of the Ixian tech is the Holtzman shields early on. It's only when we get down the road with the Ixian, the no globes and the no rooms and that kind of tech. How would they? Well, anti-entropic, I suppose. How would you present that? I don't know if you look at John Schoenherr's art of is it the no globe? I kind of think of it as a bit like a genie's bottle or something like the TARDIS. um, but I don't know. It's interesting. One of the things I think about, I think we're going to see. I think we were going to see some culture coming to the TV, but I don't think it's happening. But one of the concerns about the culture is how do you show a culture ship with your special effects, considering the scale of the things. But how would they do it? I'm not too sure. How do you make them relevant and relatable? Well, I suppose that there's something to do with anti-entropic, and I suppose the technology might still be something that's sought after these days. Bringing top dollar on eBay, says Randomity. I've got the 3 first editions of Dune here, the analogs. I was thinking about selling them. Ninja had in the encyclopedia was more consistent with the original saga than Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson's Butler and Jihad, putting it as nicely as possible. Wasn't it the Ixians that cloned genetically engineered Hawaii Nori? Yes, I think so. And Malky, I think they're all part of the Ixian. I think it's the Ixians end up getting wiped out, I think, really because they're not predated on by the God Emperor. I think it's something that's quite notable. And Hawaii Nori is a very interesting concept, and you can take that into your Greek mythology as well, I think. It's an interesting name. I don't know where the name Why Nori comes from. I don't know what the etymology of it is, and I suspect it's something quite. I must have a look it up actually. Um, so the Butlerian Jihad in the encyclopedia more consistent with the original saga. It's been a long time since I've actually read flicked through this. I've used it as reference while I was doing the PhD. And it does read quite well. I'll tell you something. I'll tell you what I like best about this, and I don't know if you'll agree with me, is that a lot for me. I think the problem with the Brian Herbert, we always talk about this, is that the authorial voice of is wrong. That they don't sound like Frank Herbert, and even if you think about the way you read something in your own mind, or even if you listen to it, even when you're reading the things out loud. Or hearing them read out loud, they just don't sound the same. And you don't get that with the Dune Encyclopedia. For anybody who's got it there, I maybe Grindark's got a copy there, possibly randomly, but for anybody who has got a copy there, it does read like it's got Frank Herbert's authorial voice, if you see what I mean. I'm not too sure why, but I think Willis McNally did a really good job. I think if for any Dune fans there, that there's, Willis McNally, Professor McNally interviewed Frank Herbert, and at the time, I suppose where I'm at, and not everything being up on YouTube, etc., I was able to just get a transcript of it. But I think the actual recording of those interviews is on YouTube, and a lot more actually about Frank these days out from American TV over the years. So there we go. But I don't know. What do you guys think about the whole? I'm kind of curious because I'm just curious what you think of the whole shutting down the Dune Encyclopedia from a legal point of view. It's just legally slammed down. Well, I wonder what you think about it. Um, hmm, I think it's a bit sad, to be honest with you. So, in all honesty, if anybody wants a copy of the Dune Encyclopedia, I have it on PDF. So fire me an email down to sciencefictionstation@gmail.com, and I'll send it to you in the post. But if you're a Dune fan, you'll love it, I think. Has anyone got any questions for me, either about Dune, tonight's episode, or science fiction in general? It's quite nice to actually sort of get to meet all of you properly. I know it's a pity that we can't have a multiple way conversation going on, I suppose. But and I'm not even too sure where most of you are, by the way. So hello to all of you, wherever you're at. I think a lot of you are in America, according to my statistics. I'll tell you a wee bit. I suppose a few things about the show as well. But the station, we're not going to be making the science fiction station. We're not going to be activating membership on it. Simply put, we want it to all be accessible to people. One of the things I was going to say is actually discovered for the first time that somebody's actually referenced my work in another academic work, and I can't read it because I have to pay to see it. So I suppose one of the reasons why we put these videos up is to actually make it accessible, because otherwise, in fact, I have to pay to see my own work on the web. So doing this is one of the reasons why we've done this. Actually, sorry, is to get around that. Let's see, what is it? Aquavit, what of the Golas and the relationship to their masters? Here I'm speaking of Peter and Duncan as Gola and the Baron and Leto the Second. Very, very similar. Oh, like Peter and the Baron and Duncan as Gola and Leto the Second and Mineo, I suppose. No, it's not Gola. The relationships to their masters, I don't know. There's something quite funny about all of that. Related to the goals, didn't Frank Herbert bring back Duncan because he was a popular character with fans? Yes, he did actually. That's the thing. But he absolutely did, and I think it became habit forming because then he brings the Baron back inside Alia's mind. So yes, the choice of Duncan is that he did want to bring the character back as popular. The idea of Golas is sown in the book of Dune, and Peter's a twisted mentat is actually a Gola. and you'll see we've got some stuff coming up on this with the footnotes and the references there, so you can check it out. But it's not given away in June, and yeah, so really bringing that technology into June Messiah with the hate gola, and the hate goal is quite interesting. There's a lot going on there, and it's a sort of the hate goal is a sort of philosophical trap, a gom jabbar almost in itself, I think. Um, Piter and the Baron, I I don't know. The whole idea of a twisted mentat is quite bizarre, I think, because they surely would figure out that they're going to get murdered pretty quick. And I think that's the case. I think that maybe the Baron would just go through his Piters as often as he needed to. But it means your mentat doesn't develop experience over time. But I suppose isn't that the point of a gola, is that you get the memories of the previous person. So the whole Leto the Second and Duncan thing is the idea of a boon companion, I suppose. Um, and it often doesn't end well for the Duncan. I suppose we only get glimpses of multiple endings for the multiple deaths for Duncan. What are the goals in the relationship to their masters? I'd say Duncan turns on Leto the Second quite often. So it's the reason why Duncan is reincarnated is to do with his fanatical loyalty to the Atreides, but it's to do with one other thing, and it's I think the God Emperor tells you it's to do with his rebellious streak. It's the thing that they're looking for, and it's why he keeps it's that the Leto loves about Duncan, is that he's a rebel. And there's a thing about rebellion, I think, to a degree within the books. Really goes to bring goals and planet memories are somehow embedded in the flesh itself. Idaho was grown, not cloned. Yeah, it's if we get into the technology, what's going on there? Is it nuclear infusion? Is it cloning? What on earth? And it's cells being lifted from a cadaver, isn't it? As it's described. So the memories are somehow embedded in the flesh. I know it's a hard one to take, I suppose, but it's running with the idea of collective unconscious and race memory and your genes itself and what passes on in genes. I think recent work has shown that babies' DNA is resequenced in utero due to severe external stimuli. So if you're having a baby, your baby's DNA can change right up to the point of birth due to bad or either very bad or very good external stimuli to the mother. Um, so yeah, and there's a lot of if you actually look at a lot of the character names in Dune, by the way, Piter de Vries. If you have a wee look at some of these names are actually all linked to real people, and particularly with the I think if you look at the work on De Vries is actually is he a father of genetics or something like that. There's a whole bunch of names in Dune that are quite relevant to things. The Tansley effect, that's something else as well. And I'm not 100% sure. I'll maybe check this out for you, but I think I have a few wee comments about that somewhere in the footnotes. So Coca-Cola is like ghoul, it's the idea that something ghoulish and bringing the dead back to life and so on and so forth. Piter's a bit of a rebel as well. He is, but he's also a psycho. Brad Dourif was Piter in the Lynch film. Yes, he was. I thought he was fantastic. Again, Brad Dourif's one of those actors that you can just pop him into anything, and he's hey, he does very, very well in those kind of things. Weissman value is much more permeable than first thought. Sean, yes, indeed. If that's what the Weissman bar is to do with birth. Brad Dourif is phenomenal as an actor. He is indeed. Yeah, I think one of the best things I've ever seen him in was for those who either like or hate Babylon 5. There's a Babylon 5 episode called I think it's the Garden at Gethsemane, where he plays a serial killer who's had his, oddly enough, I suppose, had his memories removed, which was really good. Yeah, so there's lots of questions. I think the other thing with a lot of Herbert's ideas is that he's coming out of the 50s and 60s. So as much as if you think that his book's a product of the 60s, it's first published in 63, but he's been writing it for 5 years. So really, Herbert's getting in on the Dune thing in the late 50s. To be honest with you, so yeah, the goals are quite interesting, and I think it's one of possibly the detractions of the Dune series is that it's hard to give up a character, isn't it? It's and the only I suppose I don't know what anybody thinks about this, but I got a sense that whenever we got to the very end of the Dune saga series with the Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson, the two books that finished it, and I just thought, well, hey, everybody's back, and it, um, I don't know. It's if there's it seems that then that mortality doesn't become a problem in the Dune universe really, or I don't know. It's that death seems to have little meaning if you can just keep pumping out the same people back and forth again. But I suppose who was asking that? Ram Domedy and Grimdark. I don't know if you're aware of the boys from Brazil, which is Ira 11, isn't it? I think I mentioned Ira 11 the other day. Yeah, there we are. Oh. Well, Ira 11's author of The Stepford Wives and Rosemary's Baby. But there we go. The boys again. Everything's backward here. Sorry, the boys from Brazil. You probably know the famous film, but that's all about multiple clones of Hitler, isn't it? And I think the film, the ending of the Hi Babs. I think the end of the film is brilliant, isn't it? With all the Hitlers telling your man to go to hell and they just want to go play football. The idea, I suppose, of bringing one personality back into the same body over and over again, I'm not too sure. It's one of those things that's just a bit fun, I think, really. Again, almost like MP3s. Where do we get John first? Sorry, flies. Brad was phenomenal as an actor. He isn't. We said that. Brad Dourif was Peter. Was the last? Sorry, trying where we were at here. Dourif was shamelessly chewing up the scenery in June '84. I think he's great. Is the Juice of Safu thing, the way he does that, I think it's particularly. I think Peter's death is a bit over the top, but again, Brad Dourif's very fun. I think Peter's one of those odd characters, isn't he? He's very much. I suppose in the Youth Master type, that kind of Igor type character, I suppose. The reason Lynch's is creepy. Fun but creepy. Yeah, I still thought it was quite funny. I think De Vries is meant to be sleazy and deadly, quite serpentine in some ways, I think. But he came across as being not that dangerous, I thought, more intellectually dangerous than physically, I suppose. But he came across as sort of creepy fun. What was the first occurrence of cloning in science fiction literature? How does this correspond with Herbert's concept of a Gola? Goodness gracious, I could grab books and figure that out for you now. I don't know, to be honest. Randomly, this thing is fade is weird. Cloning, it's I suppose whenever it does something turn up in science fiction, the idea of making a copy of something. So I'd imagine that it probably corresponds to the development of the ideas within science. It's generally how we first get things like this. So I would have to have a wee look into it for you. Cloning, it's a hard thing to think about. So I'd imagine it's something that's probably coming out in the Victorian era. So to do with things like soft inheritance and stuff. We have Gregor Mendel's work at the time. Again, we have some of this there. So it's I'm not just don't want to say in case I'm completely wrong, but you can tie that in with, I suppose, making a copy of something. Yeah, I suppose you get a few things like that in Greek mythology if you look at the Pygmalion myth and so on. Galatea. So I'm not too sure. Cloning is, but it's an interesting thing. We've definitely got things like going back to the 70s. Got things like Logan's Run. There's three Logan books actually by the original books, not but the film, But I would imagine it's something that definitely with H.G. Wells. Right, I've got my head on now. I'd say you're probably looking around the late Victorian period. Could be completely wrong, but things like the Island of Dr. Moreau, um, would probably I would probably think about Island of Dr. Moreau starting there, and seeing what comes either before or after it. It would be a good, as I said, I don't really know, but it'd be a good place to begin looking. Um, and if any of you are into H.G. Wells, or if you're not into H.G. Wells, again, because of a Victorian writer, H.G. Wells's books are brilliant and easy to read and quick to read, and they're just a wealth of great science fiction. Sting was, as Fade was weird. He only appeared in three states, including the famous Speedo one. Yes. Well, that is his outstanding moment in the film, isn't it? Sting there with his Speedo and looking like Sting, I suppose. Characters practically ignored in '84. Yeah, quite a few characters, I think, as well. Um, Interesting. Sting, I recall. I think I was saying to Babs about things on the radio. We have, I suppose in Britain we have the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy first appeared on radio, and it's pretty good. We have things like the Lord of the Rings, the Brian Sibley adaptation, which is fantastic, much better than the films. Um, we've got some of these good BBC dramas. I was talking about Old Harry's Game, which is a sort of supernatural. Well, it's a comedy, but I'd say it's science fiction, but it's about the devil and all the people that end up in hell. But one of the things that I remember that they did was, I think there was an adaptation way back of Gormenghast. Was it Gorman? Maybe Titus Groan. Titus Groan, Gormenghast, Titus Alone, isn't it? By Mervyn Peake, and I believe that Sting was. I think Sting was Steerpike in it, I believe. Not a great performance, I thought. He's a decent enough musician, I suppose. Yeah, H.G. Wells, Loremaster. I've only read The Island of Dr. Moreau and Time Machine for H.G. Wells, but I enjoyed what I read from him. Invisible Man's a cracker, and The War of the Worlds. Then Grimdark is the one you've missed. And it's fantastic. I can tell you this, if I can remember correctly, the War of the Worlds. It's part of this group of novels that we call invasion novels, Thames Valley disaster novels. But my old university gets destroyed in the War of the Worlds in the book. They're like it's a kind of a disaster travelogue. It takes you through the best parts of picturesque London and around London, and then the Martians blow it up. But Strawberry Hill, where I went, is in the War of the Worlds, and it gets blown up, I think, by the Martians. But yeah, the shape of things to come. I mean, God, we could go on all day. Have a look, Grimdark. It's the War in the Air, and he doesn't write all. It's not all science fiction from H.G. Wells as well, but massive output. He's our kind of granddaddy of modern science fiction. But if you like, I love The Time Machine. I think The Time Machine's a fantastic book. Pardon me. One of the few works of science fiction that I studied in school, actually. But The War of the Worlds is a fantastic book. And it's book. I suppose the original story keeps changing and evolving for modern times. You missed the iconic ones. Well, no, you got a couple of the iconic ones as well, Grimdark. I'm trying to think of them as well, but I suppose the really famous ones, The Invisible Man, War of the Worlds, The Shape of Things to Come, The War in the Air, The Time Machine, Island of Dr. Moreau. But and particularly The Island of Dr. Moreau, Time Machine, and War of the Worlds all deal with aspects of evolution, really. So there we go. Right, folks. So we got any more questions? Fire away. I do enjoy this, by the way. I said I have a decent sort of little science fiction knowledge head on me, and I'm happy to sort of share my thoughts and opinions. And I'm really delighted to hear yours as well. I never did find out where you're all from, by the way. If there's anybody not in America, say, give us a shout to where you're from. Otherwise, I'll assume you're all in the US. And 5 hours behind us, I think. So it's 11:30 here tonight. Oh, there we go. If anyone is interested, Erewhon is available as a LibriVox on YouTube. Give it a listen. The young lady who reads it makes a good tale. There you go. Yeah, and a lot of the classical studies texts you'll find on Project Gutenberg as well. What's your take on Leto's fish speakers and his theory on women forming the bulk of his military? Ah, well, you've given me a good question there, Randolph. I can tell you that there are 2 entire chapters gone to the wind from my PhD. Simply put, they wouldn't let it go in because of word length, and I went well past my word length, and I negotiated my word length in the first year and got lied to quite badly by the academic institution that I'll not name. So part of there would have been, as much as we've got an introduction in the 3 big chapters covering all the 3 major themes, there were other big themes that we didn't get to go on with, and one of them was sex and gender, really as a whole, as separate from evolution, because it's a big part of it. So absolutely, this is all ties into. There's a whole lot of stuff here. So fish speakers, if you understand what a fish speaker is, I suppose, first of all, is it's a thing from mythology and folklore. They're women who, it's a form of divination. They talk to fish to find stuff out. We've stuff like that in Irish mythology, the salmon of wisdom, and so on and so forth. So the salmon in particular in Irish mythology is quite interesting. So fish speakers are you could say as the original term is supposed to do with a form of oracle or divinity. Or sorry, not divinity, divination. Apologies, divination. So the idea of creating an all-female army. I mean, Leto II talks quite a bit about it, and you're getting Frank's ideas on the military, Frank's ideas on homosexuality, and the cult of mystique that builds up around individuals. So it's interesting because we do get to. Dune's all about the different ways that different parts of humanity can evolve, as much as the War of the Worlds shows us too. Here's the Eloi, here's the Morlocks, but we actually have every different group in Dune is an evolutionary shift. And the fish speakers in this group, we have an all-female army. Again, it's I think. And the idea is it's to do. I think it's to do with masculinity, toxic masculinity, male homosexuality, the nature of the military. Where are we? What's your take on it? I'm going to say anyhow. In the US, Babs is in the US, Toledo, Ohio, where the rest under Michigan. Frank Herbert, speechwriter for several US politicians. Yes, he was, and he was very proud that none of them ever got into office. Back to randomity. Well, they're meant to be. It's all female. I don't know how you look at it. There's different groups within the Dune universe that are like that. So we have the Bene Gesserit, we have the fish speakers, and we have the honored matres. And it's probably just, I think, again, a bit of control from Leto II, but he comments quite a lot on it, and it's the idea of having the all-female army. I suppose what he's really commenting about is the male nature of violence and the military and the mystique, and he's quite right about it. I suppose how national militaries recruit young people. Some countries are a bit more enlightened these days. They're happy to train their young women to go out and kill people as well as their young men. But male army would turn on the population terms. If you understand the army, what an army is, I can give you a classicist point of view that a soldier has been the same thing throughout history and always carries the same weight, etc., regardless of what their culture is. But a soldier's primary job is to find the enemy and then kill him or her. It's as simple as that. And if you'll go with, well, my take on it is, if you think that I would say to you, the idea that politics is the science of the happiness of man, or the happiness of the individual is subservient to the happiness of the collective. And that's the Aristotle's Nicomachean definition of politics. It's all about creating a eudaimonia. I think, as Babs pointed out there, there's a good spirit. Happiness is what politics is about. Whenever next time you hear somebody saying, "Oh, they're playing politics," then they clearly don't know what it is or what they're about. But politics is all about making us a lot more happier. But if it's okay to squish one person to keep our collective happiness going, that's what Aristotle's saying. I think he's wrong about that. I think our collective happiness is based on how we look after the individuals in our society. But that's just me. But so therefore, what is war? And well, different definitions on war. But von Clausewitz would tell you, I think, that war is an extension of politics by any or all means. And your soldiers are told what to do by your politicians. I think America. Oh goodness! I mean, your new president has done, out of revenge, done something very, very bad, and I don't know how he's living with himself at the minute. But the use of a military tool by, you can elect anybody and go, here you go, here's the world's biggest killing machine. What are you going to do with it? So I think that the idea that Frank's trying to say is that the female sensibilities are better geared towards the military and this kind of thing. There's a lot of, you'll find this kind of idea in some feminist science fiction as well. Thought the male army would turn on the populace in times of peace. Male armies don't need to turn on the population in times of war as well as peace. So that's the problem with soldiers. We were talking about Archimedes the other day. If you look at his end, for example, it wasn't Frank Herbert. Let's see. For why he learned not to trust authority. So I just got to catch up. But Grimdark said that Herbert was a speechwriter for several U.S. politicians, and he was. And again, stuff like that you might find in Brian Herbert's biography of his father. But he's very proud that none of them got elected to office. So, do not trust authority, as Grimdark says, is one of the major lessons of Dune. Leo felt the male army would turn on the population in times of peace. Absolutely. Doc said all he wrote for Lost. Makes sense. There maybe field politicians as opposed to bad leaders. Again, a politician. What is a politician? I have very different opinions about this. You see, politics is the science of the happiness of humanity. So I listen to people on the TV talking about politics and they don't know what it is. It's a bit like whenever you see people on experts on the news and they go, well, the data tells us this. As an IT guy, I can tell you, data tells you nothing. If you think you can read data as a human being, well, wow, you're unique. Data has no meaning to human beings at all. At least they process it into information before we can deal with it. The OC Bible is reference to Irish gangs. Okay, what's this one? Irish gang, Orange Catholic Bible. Yes, exactly. Evolved to Masonic. I'd say the Masonics around a long time before those Irish gangs. Sovereign is he who decides the exception. Carl Schmidt. Sovereignty is another interesting word. And it's funny, I suppose, then you look at terms of power. We have terms like dictator, authoritarian. If you break these words down, to dictate is to talk, to be an authoritarian is to be an author, to write. Excuse me. So Frank did say, so the fish speakers evolved into the honored mattress, and I think Herbert's critical as well of the fish speakers, but it's all in there in Dune, in God Emperor of Dune, as I remember. My own memory of this book is fuzzy. I have decided that, as I said, I'm reading the first Dune book now, so I'm going to work my way all through all six again. And the one thing I'm looking forward to most is the God Emperor of Dune. So the fish speakers have this idea of an all-female army, and it's an idea that's played around with in feminist science fiction and science fiction in general as well. The idea of an all-female army, I suppose you have the Amazons in Greek mythology, Greek history maybe as well. So they turned up at the Siege of Troy. Consider the likely with the scanning. Yeah, I get that. That's the sense that it's the the honored matres is the god emperor trying to take a bit of control there, and that there is something of once you get the scattering, that's pretty much what I think a lot of the honored matres are. I think there must be some sort of combination of Bene Gesserit and the fish speakers. The fish speakers are pretty dangerous anyway. I think that's what Fremen to a degree as well. Experts say scientists agree exhibit are big red flags in the corporate press. I know. I suppose the one thing is I'm supposed to consider having a PhD, that they tell you that you're meant to consider yourself an expert, and that you should go out there and say that. And it's not the nicest thing to do. I know this, I know that, but I don't know. I love the experts that just some geezer who knows something. How the spice knowledge was lost is what puzzles me. Knowledge is lost easily. Let me see. I suppose a good thing is that, oh goodness, my eyes. We talk about the Atreides myth and the fact that it's actually linked to history. Well, after the siege of Troy, basically you get the Bronze Age collapse. Some of you were talking to me about, we were discussing Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey, and the relationship between the Atreides and both these Homeric epics, and Paul Atreides and the Atreides myth in Dune. And simply put, that the Bronze Age collapses as the Greeks' Dark Ages. They lose from that point. It's about 1170, something like that, 1172 or something. I think is a date that's popular to be bandied around. But basically, their whole civilization, and by proxy all the local area groups around the Mediterranean, different city-states, all collapses. What you get out of that is that they could read and write, and then they lost the ability to read and write for several hundred years. So whenever we're talking about Homer, and I think this is really important, by the way, there's a word associated, the poet and maker, particularly because the word maker, poiesis, means to make in Greek. So, for example, this book is, and if you understand the use of this with Frank Herbert a lot, the maker of Dune, it's a term that's associated with him, the idea of poiesis. So yeah, the fact is that Homer was blind and illiterate. The Iliad and the Odyssey weren't written down, and I think it was ultimately in Athens then that they put out a call equivalent, really, to, hey, if you're one of these rhetoricians or orators that can repeat this epic poem, come here and we'll write it down. And I think that's why we have the Iliad and the Odyssey. But they were epic poems that were spoken. So Homer. I don't know if Samuel Butler, by the way, put out a theory, is well known for a theory on Homer, that he believed Homer was a woman, and wrote a book on it, I believe. But yeah, Homer's blind and illiterate, and Homeros in Greek means slave, by the way, I think. So please do a vid on the Greek roots. I will do. Well, I've actually started writing it today. I've been pretty busy, but I've done the Tipper Tapper, and I managed to go find that section from Dune where Paul, that it overlaps with Paul and his inaction, So and the only thing is, Greek myth is complicated. It's a big subject. Duke Leto didn't have Agamemnon's ego for sure, being descended from House Atreus. I don't know. I think he's got ego aplenty. Agamemnon's quite an interesting character, but he's very villainous, I think. I suppose the Trojan War isn't really one of those who are the good guys or who are the bad guys. There are heroes on both sides, and it's one of those that it depends on how you look at it. But it's not a book where the good guys beat the bad guys. It's some Greeks beat the Trojans, but it's not a great thing, I think. There we go. Homeric question is an entirely different debate. It is indeed. And it's interesting, I think, too, the great storytellers, if Homer was a slave, so was Aesop, by the way. And I kind of was a slave myself for a little bit of a time. That's another story. And I don't mean it in a nice way. Excuse me. Oh, thank you. I'm groovy. I inspire awe. I'm actually generally quite hard to take. I hope you don't mind me, folks. My personality tends to rub people up quite badly, the wrong way. Uh, that's what I was thinking of. Sorry, oddly saying rub. Somebody was asking me about no ships, and a genie in a bottle kind of thing is what I imagined them to be. The no rooms and the no globes, something like that. Why Nori had is it because she was raised in a no globe? Isn't that correct? There's something of the genie in the bottle about her. I think. I don't know if you ever have a look at much of the stories like the Arabian Nights or anything. Let me just catch up, folks. So spice. So Babs, yeah, knowledge is lost all the time. I'm afraid. It's a current thing with history. I didn't know that the OCB was a reference to Irish street gangs that evolved into quasi-Masonic orders. And the Orange Order. Quasi-Masonic, I would say it's the Masonic orders exist, but prior to the Orange Order, and the Orange Order is more that kind of in that mode. But the Orange Order is a religious order. I have nothing good to say about it. The House of Orange, by the way, is extinct. In case anybody wants to know about the whole Northern Ireland situation and the whole William Prince of Orange thing, the person that they worship, his family line is extinct, and the Dutch royal family is House of Orange Nassau, I believe, is a distaff branch of the family. So there you go, hundreds of years of nuttiness for nothing. Duke Widow did have, but yes, the Orange Catholic. I'll tell you this actually. We were talking about. Let me just quickly catch up here. Did you, yeah, thoughts on Julian Jay's idea of the bicameral mind with regard to home? Sean, I have not read that at all. I have no idea what you're talking about, so sorry. I'll tell you what, I will scribble it if you give me a second. I will scribble that down and look it up because I'm always interested on pretty much anything to do with that kind of thing. So, Julian Jane's bicameral mind in regard to Homer. Ooh, okay. That as well. I wonder what that's about. I'm curious. I'll look into that, Sean. If there's a stub or an article on it online, I'll have a wee nosy. Yeah, but Butler's ideas about Homer, I suppose they had some merit actually, but and again, he's a classical person, classically educated person, sort of thing. So the orange, yeah, the Orange Order, the product, I don't like we talk about bias, I suppose, and what you bring to the party. I'm from Northern Ireland, and I'm not Protestant or a Catholic or anything that you would identify anybody from Northern Ireland as. I'm what you may call a culture of one, and I suppose the best way to put it is that all of the people of Northern Ireland have been doing their damnedest to kill me for my entire life. So I don't like them very much. And that's whether they're Catholic or Protestant. And it's also the reason why I work outside of the education system, which is 100% sectarian, and so is the police force. We have our imperial masters here. Our police force is run by an English guy over from to sort out the colonies. So imperialism is very much alive in Northern Ireland. And it's not that I dislike either side. I dislike both of them equally. So there is a thing about the Northern Irish, and there's a lot of Irish mythology within Dune, and it's one of the reasons that as much as we talked about bias, it's why I don't go near it. But in particular, the museum Fremen, or you've hit it on the head. If you understand who Frank Herbert's family background is, so we have this. Unfortunately, it's the Irish Catholic Protestant Germanic thing. And it's very much a part of who Frank Herbert is. And in particular, if you note that God Emperor of Dune comes out around the same time as the White Plague. So if that's Herbert's book on Ireland, the evolution of human mind. So the museum Fremen, not the Fremen, the museum Fremen are the people of Northern Ireland, or the Irish, basically. But especially the people that are in the Orange Order, that's them. In other words, there are people that that extol themselves in the virtues of peoples who fought battles hundreds of years in the past, and live firmly in the past to the point that they've degraded their own society so bad. And that's there's an interesting poem by Seamus Heaney, if anybody knows Seamus Heaney, who's actually from Northern Ireland, but has kind of just had enough of the place and went and got his Irish citizenship. It's called Hercules and Antaeus, and the Hercules and Antaeus myth is Antaeus is a chthonic god, minor deity from Greek mythology that Heracles encounters on his labors, 12 labors, but there's actually 13, and he's Seamus Heaney's analogy for the Northern Irish. The point is he's a chthonic god, so he fights people, mugs them. He's a bandit. He kills people at the side of the road. As long as his feet, chthonic is to do with the earth, as long as his feet touch the earth, he can't be beat. And Heracles eventually lifts him. Heracles is an Olympian, to do with Olympian gods versus chthonic deities, and lifts him up in the air and thralls him. That's because his feet don't touch the earth. Seamus Heaney's analogy there is that if the Northern Irish ever get their feet off the ground, they're doomed. That our place is absolutely in the gutter, and that we should stay there and never attempt to get out. And if you have a look at that poem, it's quite interesting. Frank Herbert, I think, converted to Zen Buddhism later in life and a lapsed Catholic. Yeah, if you have a look at the biography, again, there's a sort of wee war between his maternal aunts and stuff, and the whole Irish Catholicism within these type of women are well known within Irish society, and they're absolute mad. They're nutters. They really are quite. I don't want to comment too much about Northern Irish society, to be honest, because I don't have anything nice to say about it. Apologies to anybody there, but yeah, there is a lot of the whole Orange Catholic thing. But especially with the museum framing of God Emperor Dune, I think are very much. And as I said, if you read that book, came out the same year as the White Plague, I think, and that's Herbert launching a genetic plague. It's one of these stories where the IRA blew up a scientist's family, and he decides to take full on revenge in a very mythological sense, I think. And it's a book that gave me a lot of ideas for the wrong reasons. Only read Seamus Heaney's Beowulf translation, was quite good. I've taught Heaney quite a lot. I like Seamus Heaney a lot. Just watched your entire previous show. I didn't realize you were live now. Hey, Newsreader, nice to see you. Yeah, we're doing a wee bit of a Q&A for anybody who's watched these videos or has any questions. And we just thought we'd do it every night, as we're doing a video every night and counting down to hopefully seeing the Dune movie. So thought Homer gave the first depiction of, what was that? Sorry, something to do with Shaman. Heard of that as well. He thought it's something to do with the evolution of the human mind. The early man thought that his own self-consciousness was the voice of God. Thought Homer gave the first depiction of consciousness. Oh, that's quite interesting. Question: in Dune, what is the interdimensional female being, and why doesn't she seem interested in helping humans out? And what is she doing that she seems so preoccupied with? Which Dune? What's that you're talking? Can you give me Can you be a wee bit more specific? Is that? I'm not too sure what you're talking about there. Newsreader. I'm just rereading Dune at the minute for the first time. What is that interdimensional female being? Why doesn't she seem interested in helping humans out? And what does she do that she seems so preoccupied with? I'm not sure. Wait, is she the Butler woman? If this is in the Brian Herbert, Kevin J. Anderson books, Newsreader, I wouldn't have a clue, to be honest with you. There is a sort of we talked about, there is some sort of agency mentioned. And so that's not canon. Okay. Oh no. I mean, I've read a few of the Kevin J. Anderson, Brian Herbert books. I'd happily answer it if it was within the first few of those. But I know they've churned out an awful lot of them. Canon's an interesting question, I suppose. Canon's pretty much the work by an author. So Frank Herbert's canon, I suppose, is pretty much anything by Frank Herbert. Newsreader, do you mean? Yeah, I thought you were maybe talking, Newsreader, about Daniel and Marty in the last couple of books there. And of course, that's one of the big mysteries. But there is a suggestion. I don't know how Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson have run with this over the years, but in the original books, there is a suggestion that there's some kind of agency that's operating behind the scenes that has manipulated the Bene Gesserit, the breeding program, and I think we were talking about that. We never see the payoff for that, but excuse me, maybe Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Have had a look at that kind of thing, I suppose. I always thought she was Norma, the woman who came up with the Holtzman effect. I think the Butlers had transcended to some other dimension. So I suppose it's interesting that the Butler thing has been named after a character. When I always thought that the Butlerian Jihad was named after Samuel Butler. But there we go. Has anyone got any more questions? I'm supposed to only sort of do this for about an hour, but it seems that time flies when you're having fun. Where are the aliens in Dune? Are sandworms alien? Well, they're an animal and they're a plant at the same time, so I would go with yes, they're alien. But are there aliens in Dune? Yes, every single human group is an alien in Dune, as in that they're not. If you think about genetically, what is a Homo sapien? What are we? Then all of them are different than us. They're all branches or mutations of humanity. And that's what I was thought. Or you can consider them all human, but I think if you were brought up on a different planet, it would affect you. In terms of the evolutionary question that we looked at with the argument between Samuel Butler over the issue between Darwinism and Lamarckism, the Fremen are described as having their evolution altered with their intestines to help to do with water. So they're not, if you want to call baseline human. I don't think anybody in the Dune universe is human per se, but it's being a bit pedantic. I don't know what you guys think. But yeah, certainly. I mean, all the animals on Dune, I think, are all transplanted from Earth. Aliens not evolved from Earth. Alien Xeno is anyone that's not out from Athens. Randomity in the ancient world, if that's what an alien is anyone who's not from Athens to an Athenian, which I always think is quite funny. So aliens is something that's different than yourself, but we use the term for monsters and so on from outer space these days. It's a bit like Aborigine, if you know this term. If you know who the Aborigines are, it's the Aborigine. It's to do with the city of Rome, but aboriginal, if you see what I mean. The Bene Gesserit better, more noble. Here we go. Leto the Second's plan, Golden Path, is just for humanity to survive, right? But the Bene Gesserit's plan is to refine the savagery out of humanity to end human suffering. So are the Bene Gesserit better or more noble, says News Readout. That's an interesting point, News. Let's have a wee think about it. The plan for humanity to survive, is it enough just to survive, I suppose? And an awful lot of humanity doesn't survive because of Leto the Second's plan. It's a crucible to crush humanity, isn't it? It's only those that are. In terms of Herbert's look at evolution, and really a lot of it does come down to that rather mistaken concept of the survival of the fittest. And it all depends on what you mean by fit, which is is quite an interesting thing. You get a lot of people who talk about fight or flight, for example, whenever they're talking about human and animal responses and so on, but they often forget that there are many other options than fight or flight in the real world. Hide, is another. BG methods. So the golden path, Paul's golden path vanishes the minute he decides to give it up, and Leto's golden path appears. And I'm not sure that the Bene Gesserit. We were talking about what is the goal of the Bene Gesserit's breeding program. We know that the goal is to create a Kwisatz Haderach to get the other memory of the male line, but then what? So it's kind of a bit, you've done it. Now what do you do? We were saying, do you spend the rest of eternity looking backwards through all these memories? It's a bit similar to the problem that a lot of government agencies have in terms of collecting data on individuals these days. Is they're collecting so much of it, they'll never be able to sift through it. So is the Bene Gesserit's plan to refine the savagery out of humanity to end human suffering? See, again, it's an interesting point, but maybe to survive that kind of thing, you would have to be pretty savage in the first place. To say that the Bene Gesserit are a civilizing force or an influence, in that sense, is again depending on how you look at civilization. I used to always say that civilization was the ultimate barbarity, but it's not being particularly nice to what we call barbarians or something. I think that the term barbarian is the Greeks' name for the Berbers, I believe, and it's because they thought they spoke like burr 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 burr. That's the noises that they make. I think that's where the word barbarian comes from. I think the Greeks were pretty freaked out by the Berbers because they wore trousers, I believe. The Greeks weren't. Oh, sorry, the Athenians. Apologies. Um, so the Bene Gesserit, the lack of non-humanoids is strange. It is, but I suppose the focus of Dune is the evolution of mankind, and I think if we had lots of alien beings whizzing around the place, we would get distracted by them. And I think the really good thing, Babs, about Dune is that we get to see the alien in ourselves. Um, we were talking about race and skin color the other day with the Liet Kynes character, and just the arguments of race that have come out that seem to be evolving in the media these days are almost the same sort of arguments that the Nazis were pumping out, with their eugenics nonsense, their terminology and so on. And I suppose the interesting thing about race is just scientifically in a taxonomic way pointless. We have our species, we know what we are. It's amazing how we can delude ourselves into thinking that other people are different than us, and we're all different than each other. But that difference that your skin is darker than mine, you're taller or smaller, whatever, fatter, thinner, whatever. All of this stuff's quite spurious and stupid, I think. I think the human race is pretty dumb in some ways, and I think what part of the appeal of Dune is that it presents you all these different possible changes to mankind. You've even got a male female only split. There's different ways that evolution's looked at, and how people, I suppose, can maybe help manipulate their own evolution. But pardon me. So I think that the lack of alien is that there is the alien is there, but it's the alien in ourselves. And I think no one group. I think the Bene Gesserit, everybody gets it wrong. I think that's the point. Or if they're getting it right, they fail to notice the random, or how it. Or I think particularly with Herbert, it's the Bene Gesserit's problem is that how they fail to realize how events affect them. And it's often the case that with the evolution that those that are involved with evolution, whether it be machine evolution or human evolution, often fail to take into account how things change themselves. And I think that's particularly the Bene Gesserit's problem. And again, I would love to reread the last two books because the Bene Gesserit are pretty self-critical and self-analytical. I suppose those would be the two books that are least ping in my head. Newsreader says the methods may be cruel and they may not even be able to achieve their goal, but surely their goal is noble. Where Leto gave rise to the so his plan doesn't seem to care about suffering. Um, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, I think. And the term nobility, I don't know. There's certain ideas and concepts within human emotions and abstracts. Nobility, the one in our country, I suppose, is loyalty. Loyalty is a perversion here, because it's been taken to such an obscene length. I suppose nobility is what is noble. We often use the word nobility often in the association with suffering, I think. So I don't know what I think we tend to have our own favorite groups, or certain individuals and groups in the Dune universe tend to speak to us in certain ways, but I think nobody's got it particularly right, and I think that's very much the point. I think we could have heroes in a lot of different ways. The Bene Gesserit, I think, are a lot of people are very impressed with the Bene Gesserit, both as characters and as a group and as an organization, an operator within the Dune universe, and particularly the ethos behind them. And we see so much of, I think, Frank's wife, her influence there. Leto's second plan was to avoid the trap of prescience and genetic stagnation. Yeah, because prescience, well, who would want it? Honestly, who would want it? Dune, I believe their goal is states as refining human beings. Their methods are cruel, but their long-term plan is to improve human beings, as stated in the book, I think. Yeah, but isn't that the raison d'etre behind everybody who's done pretty much horrific things to other human beings? So we're doing it for your own good. We're doing it to improve society. I'm going to torture you now, but I will learn much about medicine. And science, the history of science has a lot of cruelty, and it still does today. Scientists are, and I am a scientist myself. Excuse me, amongst other things. But there's a lot of cruelty done in the name of knowledge, and I don't necessarily think you always have to go about it in a cruel way. Question: how was your professor able to see your PhD thesis when you know more about Dune than him or her? Oh, well, that's pretty much the standard thing. You're supposed to know more than they are, and they would be a team basically. So whenever you're doing a Viva, your final Viva Vault, your defense of your PhD, you'll have your own supervisor basically, and a couple of people from the college who kind of know something about the subject, and then you bring in an external expert if you want. The external on my PhD is Andy Sawyer, who ran the Sidney Jones Library, the special science fiction special collections archive over at the Sidney Jones Library in Liverpool. So I picked him to be my external examiner, simply put, because his knowledge and reputation within the science fiction academic world is massive, and he knows his stuff. So as much as what you're saying there, Newsread Dial, about is if you're smart about how you pick your external supervisor for a PhD, you really want to bring someone in who knows their stuff, so that you can get a better quality of argument and debate going. So yeah, so that's how it goes. Basically, they're supposed to read it and put notes and so on. From the minute I handed mine in, it took it was a better part of 13 months from handing in to get my degree, basically. So you're stuck in limbo. And the whole PhD process, I suppose my wife has said this, that I've put her off doing a PhD. And if there was a poster child for the PhD, it's not me. It's not altogether a pleasant experience at all. And if you understood, as I put it this way, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but if I understood what I knew now, then I wouldn't interact with anybody with the university. I'd just get on and write the damn thing and submit it for a DLET. But my supervisors, etc., were fine, but the university's environments. Someone asked me, Dabs keeps mistaking me, saying that I'm a university person. I am not. Universities to me are a business to be used. That's it. They have no need to impose any kind of nonsense ethos or how you behave or any kind of crap that they all like to seem to cultivate with their own sense of history or ethos. So I use universities to educate myself, and then I walk away from them, and that's it. It's how the universities are not places of learning anymore. And if you understand that, they're businesses, and their job is to sell learning, and what you get for your money is generally not worth it. But I suppose people ask me about why did I do this PhD. I genuinely did it for the title and no other reason. So if it was, I've often said that doing a PhD in Dune is career suicide. It's a joke, by the way, but it's if I had wanted a career out of this would have ended my career. I'm able to work for myself and I'm a smart enough guy. It's as simple as that. But I have not had a single reply to a job application or job interview of any kind since doing this PhD in 2010. So having the PhD, being the doctor, makes you almost unemployable, which is a bit shit. They don't tell you that. So yeah, it's a question of get on with it, I suppose. But it's certainly not a thing that's but it does, particularly for myself in this kind of society, it changes how people treat you, and that's the reason why I did a PhD is because I'm a big fan of Doc Holliday. There you go. And if there are a few people out there who will tell you this, if you really know me, I did it so I could be called Doc. Back in the days when I was a bit immature, and I'm not joking, that's true. I'm a very whimsical, strange person. Back to you. So that is that you should know more newsreader than the people assessing you. It's how you present that information. When your PhD thesis, it's their job to attack you, basically, to field questions of all kinds, and it's your job to know your own work so well. And if the trick is in referencing the hell out of it. You back up everything you say, then you've got your armor, your shield, and your weapon, I suppose. Truth is always the best policy. As we say in this household, the truth is your weapon, your armor, and your shield. Robert Tours has done good work on the evolutionary psychology of self-deception. Thank you, Sean. There's so much out there, isn't there, to read and to look at. I like this kind of thing where you get to provide a bit of, you pick up ideas from other people and stuff to read and so on. The famine times resulted in billions of deaths, but was necessity for the survival of the species. Yeah. As long as you're not one of those billions, randomly, I think that's my point about. We talked about this the other day, that you never see what happens to the little folk in Dune, and that they all die. It's the heroes, and it's the same thing, I suppose, with the Iliad and the Odyssey. These kind of things, there are always heroes running about, but the end slaughter of everybody who's just normal Joes. Famine is not a good thing, as we can speak for in Northern Ireland and Ireland in general. So we've had, as much as people think we had a great famine, we did, but it's actually the result of multiple small famines. There's a little bit of info for you. Whenever the Great Famine in Ireland was going on, the English Parliament sent blankets. Yummy. But the Bonnie, the famine. So Bill Benny Jesuit talked about how they are capable of empathy. So they're motivated by empathy for the human condition and want to reduce the suffering due to human savagery, improve them according to whose benefit. Academia and journalism, says Sean, see themselves as the power behind the throne of the state, aka the cathedral. Ex cathedra is out of the chair. Walter Lippmann's public opinion is a good intro. I love the universe at the time of Paul, and although I enjoyed jumping thousands of years ahead, I felt kind of depressed that all the grand universe faded, or just another blip in history. Yeah, I think the universe in the first Dune book is very well realized, and it's because of that constant world building process. And it's little things somebody said about the Ixian technology, that everything that's comes from the Holtzman field. For example, I've got an idea, here's a bit of tech and a scientific principle, and it creates 3 or 4 different pieces of technology. How that's embedded within the Dune universe is fantastic. It goes from, the lights in your house to the spaceships. And I like that kind of detail. So there we go. Walter Lippmann. Sean, what's your background? You seem to know the stuff that you put out there. I've not heard any of these people at all. Are you an academic yourself, or but you seem very well read in this kind of Walter Lippmann's public opinion. Again, I don't really know these people, so I apologize if I'm not able to answer your comments properly. But if academia and journalism see themselves as the power behind the throne, I'll tell you this: the BBC here considered a journalistic quality, if you like, and their quality has fallen so far below. I'd say half the things on the BBC News website are the same quality as 16-year-old English students in school, and half the headlines don't even mean what they say. The weather's never what they say. I don't know. There's journalism has a responsibility, as does academia, to facts and the truth, I think. Journalism not so much, because there is often a desire to present the human story there. But yeah, I don't know. An awful lot of people see themselves as power behind the throne. Northern the United Kingdom, we don't really have a democracy here, although it pretends to be. And a lot of people from the UK would probably disagree with me. But where do I get my ideas from? That's an interesting question, Peter. Where does anybody get their ideas from? I suppose. Um, I suppose I've grown up. I don't sleep, and I haven't slept since I was about 9 or so. Um, I've always had to move house. I've always been on the move my entire life. I'm quite nomadic, and that's simply because of security and danger. And I've grown up. I'm a misanthrope, if you understand. I don't take it personally, anybody. Um, but I've generally grown up understanding that everyone around me is extremely dangerous, and I don't like them. That kind of thing. So I've just educated myself. The way I educated myself is based on 1984. It's the he who controls the past controls the present. He who controls the present controls the future. So I've got degrees in the past, the present, and the future, if you like. Sean's engineering and systems team, but work in finance now. Excellent, Sean. Four roles and informs very different things in the law. Iron law of oligarchy. All democracies generate into oligarchies. Oh, well, I suppose if you Athenian democracy, we have a couple of oligarchic coups back then. Oligarchy, for anybody who doesn't know, means the rule of the few. So Northern Ireland, our politicians suspended the parliament a few years back. This is at the time when Lyra McKee was murdered. And they basically have abandoned the democratic process, are doing whatever the hell they want, and there's no transparency. And it's at the minute, if you look at the Northern Ireland situation, we've got the American president, we've got the weighing in, but basically we've got three different governments. We've got the United Kingdom Parliament, the European Parliament, and the Irish Parliament, all fighting over us. And the one group of people that aren't working for us here is our own Parliament, who are a bunch of psycho-religious maniacs that wouldn't be out of place in Salem 300 years ago. Sorry, I'm not a poster boy from Northern Ireland. Where do I get my ideas from? Back to that, Peter. I'm a combination of the ancients. So I'm a classicist, and if you understand what that means, then I'm, and I just have a certain approach to life. I'm a misanthrope, but to be a misanthrope, you kind of had to have a good. I suppose you wanted better of mankind or humanity, for the better word, I suppose. Orwell's book within a book. So I'm. You will not find anyone like me in Northern Ireland. I'm absolutely unique, and do not go down well in either. Really, I do have a couple of Protestant friends. I do have a couple of Catholic friends, etc. But that's about it. And but there we go. But my ideas are I'm science fiction, and I like just thinking about things, I suppose. Science fiction, the classical world, and I'm a computer scientist. And I suppose my ideas come from wanting the world to be a bit of a better place, which is, I think, one of the fundamentals about science fiction. So I hope that answers your question, Peter Griffin. Isn't that the name of the character from Family Guy, I believe? Orwell's book within a book, Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism, is meant to be Jennifer. See, that's very interesting, Sean, because I think of 1984 as meta, very meta, and that the book 1984 itself, the book that you're reading when you're reading it, is a product of that regime. If next time you have a read at it, you'll need to keep that in mind. If you read it through that way, if you think about it that way, it might make sense. All governments suffer a recurring problem. Power attracts pathological personalities. It's not that power corrupts, but it's magnetic to the corruptible. Yeah, power doesn't corrupt. It corrupts, absolutely. But that's Frank Herbert's main point, isn't it? That it's the type of people that are drawn to power. I could run this country backwards, but I don't want to. I'm not going to. All good. So there we go. Yeah, it's fellow computer nerd. Well, I was a computer lecturer, Sean, and I actually gave up being a computer lecturer to do the PhD in June. I was actually supposed to do the PhD part time and keep lecturing, but they made me an offer, I suppose, and off I went. What motivates Leto II to endure 5,000 years of suffering? Surely it can't just be a disinterested desire to help humans survive. Surely only love could motivate him to suffer that much. Well, the love of humanity, I suppose. But otherwise, why bother? Um, but there has to be an altruistic motive to it. I think it's why will yeah, I suppose. But you could point out that humanity's doomed no matter what. That one day the sun will go, bing, the planet will go, and no matter where we go, one day the universe will, and that's us. So the question, I suppose, is that if you didn't crush humanity through all this, if you didn't put them through all this trial and tribulation, 5,000 years of suffering, well, just let them have their lives and then all die at the end of the universe, we'd have a lot more people happier, I suppose. It's about, can you see what's coming? Should you know, I suppose. So what motivates a god to do anything? Only love can motivate him to suffer that much. Yeah, I suppose. Why not? The fate of all species is extinction. Yeah. I suppose we talk about this later. I think there's in the video the idea of a Tri-Hardian mega point. That if you deal with evolution as an actual thing, what's the point of it? And a lot of people don't ever actually consider that. Where's the end point? So I think for anybody who reads the Hyperion cantos or has encountered the Etienne de Teilhard, it's quite hard to say, this idea of an omega point, an end goal to evolution is that we would probably evolve down a narrower point until we get to the point where someone becomes God, or what we would think of as a god. But it is interesting. Teilhard's a very interesting person. His character is very much tied up with the AI thing in the Hyperion cantos. James Burns, the Machiavellians, is also excellent. So just to catch up, yeah, I'm Machiavelli is quite interesting. Machiavelli is known for his book The Prince, but a lot of people don't know this, that he also wrote a book on war, and it's not a good book on war. So if you ever study warfare, we've got Clausewitz, we've got Sun Tzu, but we do have Machiavelli in there, and his book is how not to win a war, but Prince really how to bump off your political opponents, invite them round to dinner and so on. Oh, computer nerd, king of the nerds. But yes, Sean, I do like my computers. My old computer died making these videos, and I've kept it going for 20 years. So there we go. The feel of it. Anyone got any other questions? I'm happy to sit for another 10 or 20 minutes. I suppose it's one of those things where I'm just sitting here and don't have much to do, so I'm very happy doing this. Excuse me a wee second. I'm going to have a quick nicotine fix. Excuse me. What? Has anyone got any more questions at all, or just fire away comments? But you still haven't made 500. Yeah, wrong generation, mate. It's a Spectrum Plus 3 is what I have. And a Commodore 64. I suppose. Yeah, going back. Somebody was saying where to get my idea. I'll tell you something. The reason why I studied classical studies and went and did science fiction stuff like this, there's two things. And if you want to know how does science fiction and the classical world kind of meet, the answer is if you've ever looked at Carl Sagan's Cosmos. In fact, the TV series and the book, there's so much culture and mythology from all around the world in that he introduced me to Eratosthenes, who's the guy that figured out the world was a sphere a long time before Columbus or anybody like that, and started in the aspects of mankind's development from the basics of civilization up until where we're at today. The original Carl Sagan's Cosmos is a speculative work as well as a factual work, and it's what introduced me really to the classical world and the science world and the science fiction world all at once. And I have to, if you ask me what's, I don't mean this in any convoluted way, but if you ask me what's my favorite book, it's Cosmos, and it's not because it's the best written book, or it's simply what it did for me, and how it helped me understand a few things. And then many years later, uh, you'll like this, Sean, as a newsreader, my careers teacher in school. Sorry, we've got these wee flies in here, and I don't like to kill flies around. Um, my careers teacher, who was also the religious education teacher, had an early, like one of these BBC. Oh, I think it was God, it might have been an Amiga. The Alan Sugar computers. Basically, put me into the school computer. And told me that I would be a road sweeper, and then I disagreed badly with him. Not that I've any bother sweeping roads, but the computer also said that I would be a road sweeper again, and that's kind of what I was written off as at grammar school. So I didn't like that one bit, and I applied to do classical studies and through the UCAS system. Did not get in, got rejected by everybody, but I found a way in through the clearing system and got the education I wanted. So if he's out there, I'm not sweeping streets. I've got more letters after my name than are in it. So the classical studies thing is such a broad education for me, and you'll find all sorts of things in the classical world, including science fiction. And Patio of Alexandria, you could argue is one of the events that set the burning of the Library of Alexandria. You'll find its image in the Dune videos. There's a couple of famous paintings of it. It happened more than once, by the way, but it's arguably one of the events that set mankind back thousands of years. So that kind of, and that science fiction, I've always enjoyed science fiction because of my father's profession and having to move around so much as a child and constantly changing schools and not being able to maintain any kind of relationships for more than 2 years. I don't sleep, and basically my sleep problems to do with car bombs, and I just don't sleep. I'm always awake at night, and I just read a lot of science fiction, fantasy, and horror because it's a form of escapism for me, and it took me out of the madness that is this place. And over the years, I actually I was a year unemployed. I always worked as barman, etc. I had little jobs when I took myself through universities and so on. But after a year of being unemployed and trying to write some stories, I realized I was no good at writing stories back then. I was too young and didn't have enough life experience. So I went off and studied science fiction at the University of Liverpool for a year. And I applied to do the Dune PhD there, but they lost my application, so it never happened. So there's, in fact, an attempt to do the PhD, it took 3 goes. And so the whole, and then I suppose, so I trained in a very interesting master's course, which was for people who were wanting to jump skills, who were educated in a certain way, and it's one of the most intensive educational programs I've ever been put through in my life. It was extremely difficult, but I learned so much. And then I became a lecturer in computing. And I did that for a good few years, and I've taught all sorts of people in all sorts of places. I'll not go into details, but so doing the PhD basically made me unemployable, and not that I'm bothered. As I said, you do these things either for career development or for personal development, and for me it was personal development. So there's more to my PhD. It didn't really go according to plan at all, and I only completed half the study period. So I basically had to drop out to care for my mum, who was terminally ill, and the support and any kind of support and help or whatever from the university was absolute zero, and they didn't really give a shit because they got their money. But basically, the only reason I was so disgusted about the whole thing, that the only reason why I finished this PhD was I cared for my mum, who terminal cancer for 6 months, sort of day in day out, and she read the Dune books and got into them, and what she got out of them in the last 6 months is quite interesting. So she made me give her two deathbed promises. One was to look after my dad, and the other one was to get the damn PhD from the bastards, as she put it. So we did, and basically had as soon as my mum all of the affairs sorted out, and put 3 months of intense work into it. And they gave me 3 months basically, and that was it. So I just piled on, and we got it done. And what I handed in actually was too much, and I was promised to, because of the size of the Dune books, about 1,000,000 words, to do a PhD where you're limited to 100,000 words. Think about it, it's only 1 in 10 words that you can cover. So at the end of the first year of Viva, I'd submitted and give them like a 2-hour presentation. I'd introduced Dune. It takes 20,000 words to introduce Frank Herbert and Dune alone, and they decided, no, we're not going to give it to you. And I said, but you said you. So 2 chapters got thrown out. It was back to what we were talking about, sex and gender within Dune. And it's a real pity because, and the other one was going to be war and politics. And we talked about that Herbert's has a deliberate intertwining of these thematic threads, and that he actually deliberately has said that if you try to pull one of these threads apart, it's so difficult. And the thesis kind of followed that idea. So what's sad for me was, I suppose, that the way to structure the thesis was in which theme is more dominant throughout most books and take them in that order. And so because we came to the sex and gender, which was really going to look at the Bene Gesserit, the Honored Matres, the Fish Speakers, all the female characters, and particularly how, because the Bene Gesserit have some quite kooky attitudes to sex and reproduction themselves. They're very against artificial insemination, for example. All of that went, and the whole kind of Frank Herbert talks about war as a sexual rhythm. There's a book that massively influenced him on this as well. So that's kind of why and the simple fact is, if you ever do a PhD, if you do a little bit every day, I'd done so much work that the fact that I missed better part of a year and a half of the thing. My mum had cancer one time and kind of got over it, and then they'd actually missed another type, and then so I was in and out trying to look after her and trying to do my work. So simply wasn't possible, and they really were just a bunch of shits about it, to say the least. I don't, but I'll not go into too much harm about that place. I'm not mentioning it to say where it is, but in the end I got it, and it was a hard slog. So my PhD isn't kind of what you're seeing is not really what I wanted to do. Ideally, it was done under the worst of circumstances, and so Central Planet on that master's program with it. Oh, you did your mum? Yes, Sean. Thank you very much for saying so. I did. She was a great woman. I miss her very much. Was it snobbery due to the subject matter? No. No, it's again, newsread, but universities are businesses. I woke up one night with a German student in my house that the university had given her. This particular university had given her carte blanche, master keys to all the apartments to go around doing her research inside people's houses, and they told that they're they're a wee bit mad, to be honest with you. I couldn't believe it. Snobbery due to subject matter, not at all. Newsread that. But I did not go down well in such a place. Northern Ireland's education system is thoroughly sectarian, and that includes the universities, especially the universities and the schools. Actually, the colleges aren't so much. I don't know why, but but yeah. So no, I got that was it basically, and all my bridges were burned at that place because they behaved so badly. So no, I took my doctorate and walked, and that's what you do. So they mean nothing really. As people talk about their alumni or their alma maters and stuff like that, and these people, you don't really mean anything to them. They don't give a shit. So they're just after your money. It's as simple as that. And if you're getting funded for a PhD, they automatically take the money. It's supposed to pay for offices and things for you to work in. They just know. It goes, you'd be surprised. I ended up working in an office that was smaller than my toilet in the house, and I was sharing it with 4 people. and they don't give you any kind of environment or any help. Your money is entirely wasted on fees, and the only thing that you actually really need is the help of the librarian. You don't need anybody in the university to do a PhD except the librarian. That's pretty much it. if anybody's ever curious, that's the truth of it. Writing is so much harder than people realize. It requires an extreme amount of discipline. It does, Sean. Well, I put it this way, because I've done so much, and the way I studied is no problem, newsreader. All the best and have a good night. Hope that answered your questions, mate. Take care. Snowbird, you something? Yeah, Sean, I wrote 10 million words on the Dune PhD. And then, but you're writing and rewriting and rewriting. And I had one of these old Microsoft, ergonomic keyboards, and I'd actually worn out all the letters on it that I had. I couldn't see them. But yeah, I think the thesis, I got whittled down to about 100, managed to get about 140,000 in words, and then they cut it down to about 104. And so I hid an awful lot. For those of you who are interested in watching the videos, the footnotes, I had an awful lot of stuff in the footnotes because they don't count towards your word length. So there you go. But it was done in the end, and it's just that I wasn't. It was a pressure thing, and I just buried my mum, and I hadn't had time to grieve or nothing. But it was get it done or get out really. So, but it took from the minute from the point where they said you've got 3 months, it took them 13 months to look at the damn thing, read it, mark it, and give me a paper. So you end up in a kind of limbo, and it can be a very bad situation. But there you go. And so yeah, I suppose I tried to do some things for a science fiction conference in Liverpool, but I was left pretty much impoverished by whenever I did the work for the PhD. Whenever I looked after mum, I had to give up my house and my car, etc., just over time, And I tried to get back into the academic side of things at Liverpool as a part of a conference, but the money that they were looking for was so much that I'd written 3 papers on actually to do with Dan Simmons, Olympus, and Ilium. There was a conference a few years ago. It was classical studies in science fiction. Honestly, it's as if somebody created a conference for me, and I'd put in the titles of the papers I was going to submit, couldn't get the money together, and it's all, you've got to come and stay here, and we'll this, and it was ridiculous. And my only option was either to get in debt for it or not go. And at the time, it's funny enough, you'll not believe this, but now when everybody's using cameras and stuff, and part of where I'd worked, we had webcam tracking technology, and I'd offered to deliver the papers via camera to the conference, and they absolutely would not entertain me in any way whatsoever. So I was actually precluded from that conference because of money. And it's the main reason why I've made my PhD available to you on YouTube for free. And the academia and the universities in particular. And in fact, I actually gave the science fiction Sidney Jones Library, etc., a big like not too long ago on Twitter. They have monetized the crap out of their place. So once again, another bastion of supposed education is just a ka-ching business. And I suppose with science fiction, you can find an awful lot of stuff yourself. And the kind of very few universities offer programs in it. Well, certainly over here, I think it's quite different in the Americas and so on. But it's the money barrier to learning is a big problem for me, and I'm on the other side of that. I think education should be free, and as much as I could make, there's been a couple of options here. You can make or milk your work, etc., market it in a certain way. But the whole point of doing a PhD is to advance human knowledge and to educate people. And the people that you're, I suppose, in terms of something like Dune, who are you trying to educate? Well, the people that like Dune and read it, I've returned, had to eat dinner real quick. Even though Frank Herbert was deconstructing the monomyth or savior myth, was it specifically a rebuttal at Joseph Campbell? No, I think Herbert's very into the monomyth, and I think an awful lot of writers are, particularly within science fiction and fantasy. It became popular, and I think George Lucas did a lot to make that popular. Excuse me. So the monomyth is built up heavily on, and you'll kind of see this as we go along in the hero chapter. The monomyth is very much Jungian and is built very much on Jung's ideas of the archetypes of the collective unconscious. But that in itself is heavily lifted from Raglan's The Hero, who of Lord Raglan. A lot of people wouldn't know Lord Raglan if you were into mythography or the study of hero and that heroes in particular. His book is generally discredited. And I'll be the first to say this, by the way, it's a really good book. Just because books didn't get things right, it doesn't mean you shouldn't read them. And in particular, a lot of these guys that were working on the myth in the 19th century, Grimdark, if you want to know something interesting, none of them dare mention Jesus at all. They don't want to go near that name. Because of the backlash that they suspect would come from Victorian society. So a lot of these books like The Hero, and I've got my copies here actually. They're Raglan's The Hero. I suppose when was he publishing that? They come into the 19th and 20th century. And it's just, The Hero is a study in tradition with myth and drama. That's 1936 for Raglan's The Hero. This actually is a really good book. We mentioned it, we quote from it a couple of times in the chapter of The Hero. And this is Carlyle's on heroes and hero worship and the heroic in history, which is absolutely cracking. These are both really good books, by the way. And if you're interested in the study of the hero, they should be on your list, but they're not necessarily correct. But a lot of the monomyth comes from Jung, which comes from this. And I actually find Carlyle's books really good, but up until you get to Fraser's The Golden Bough, because he's the guy that goes, right, I will deal with Jesus. Let's talk about the Jesus as hero, Jesus as myth. There we go. Yes, Sean, indeed he is. And the copy of my Carlyle, you'll find the Jesus myth starts on page 666, which I think is quite funny. So the monomyth, I don't think, Grimdark, in answering your question, that he's deconstructing the hero, but the monomyth is a structure, I think. And I don't think it's a rebuttal at Campbell at all. And I think Herbert was very well invested in the Jungian ideas. And I don't know if you've read the Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces, and that always makes me think of the. What is it? There's a film about Lon Chaney Jr., isn't it? Is it The Man with a Thousand Faces or something? Always makes me think of that. I just thought the Hero Johnny and Monomyth can be used interchangeably. Okay. I look at the monomyth as a system, and it's the product of a psychologist, generally, or people with psychological training. So it's the same as Jung, and I'm surprised I haven't been attacked by this, by the way. I'm going to just say it. I did a video on Jung, and I expected to come under attack from every single psychologist out there. And I know that psychologists have seen it, and nobody's had a go at me at all. Jung and Freud have both got the classical myths extremely wrong. And it's from that basis that, unfortunately, if you understand, whenever you're first setting out the conditions for something, if you make a mess there, the problems that will spiral out of control get much, much worse. It's chaos to a degree. Jung and Freud badly misinterpreted the Greek myths. Freud in particular, the Oedipus myth, he doesn't understand it at all, and he actually infers and creates things that don't happen. And the implication that I suppose that Oedipus subconsciously wishes to kill his father, and there is actual overt knowledge of the myth within the Oedipus myth, and subconsciously, absolutely consciously and subconsciously, Oedipus does not wish to do this. It's about not knowing who his father and mother are. Oedipus means swollen feet, by the way, which is a great name. And in particular, Raglan's work begins with the Oedipus myth. Oedipus is the one that we have and because he uses it to create the system, the myth of Oedipus naturally fulfills the most steps in that system. So I'm as a classicist, and I haven't written any books on mythology, but myth is my particular sandpit, if you like. I don't buy into the monomyth at all. it's a Western way of looking at mythology, and mono meaning one, by the way, in case anyone's not sure. Simply put, there are enough myths around the world that absolutely disprove the monomyth. The classical world's full of them. Unfortunately, they're what I call the absolute crazy. Um, and you will not find analogues for them in other cultures. There are universal stories, but that's because I think being human is a universal condition to all peoples around the world. So no matter what, you're going to get stories about the sun coming up and the moon going down, that kind of thing. The hero's journey and the monomyth can be used interchangeably, Grimdark. Yeah, again, Colin heavily into Jungian archetypes, absolutely. And the Jungian archetypes, really, I suppose, this traditional these ideas. We find an awful lot of them in Dune. We have a fair bit on this in Dune itself, or sorry, in our videos coming up. Um, it's interesting because it is systemic thinking. I think the monomyth. Um, I have a deeper approach to mythology, and I don't like labels at all. But you would probably call me a euhemerist if you understand the term. And that means that I believe that all myths have some basis in that their origin has some basis in reality of some kind. Um, what that is, I'm not necessarily sure, but there are ways of interpreting and looking at myths. But they can be very particular due to their locus, I think, and their place in time. I don't know what you think. If anybody has any opinions on that, but certainly, I mean, the monomyth by Campbell is very much Herbert acknowledges this very much, so is fundamental to the creation and design of Dune, and I think it's partly I talk about this. It's the reason why George Lucas didn't rip off Star Wars. Or sorry, it's the reason why George Lucas's Star Wars did not rip off Dune. Though it's heavily influenced, and you can see an awful lot of elements in it, is that Lucas is also following the monomyth. Um, Herbert's using it before him, but it becomes popular, and especially with my copy of Joseph Campbell's book on the monolith, and it has Luke Skywalker on the cover. And I think its popularity, pop culture, has a lot to do with George Lucas's Star Wars. And yeah, for anybody who doesn't know, Sean saying yes, Thomas Carlyle is excellent. Thomas Carlyle is the book, The Golden Bough, and it was controversial at the time. The Golden Bough is where you enter the underworld, and it's a study of mythology from an anthropological point of view. And it's an excellent book, and in particular, if it discusses the priesthood at Nemi. Which is an interesting thing. If you've never heard of this, if you're a Roman slave and you manage to run from the city, you could head south to this grove, and there's a priest there. And if you can kill that man, you become the priest, and that person is untouchable by Roman authority. It's very interesting. It's to do with tanistry and the various Roman local cults and so on. But if you have a wee look at Fraser's The Golden Bough. My understanding, the copy that I have, I think, Sean, is very, very chunky, and my understanding is it's seriously abridged. It's one of those that I think there's a much, much bigger work, which would be interesting. So there we go. But the Raglan's ritualistic steps, how we look at myth, and it's about the approach to it. And Grimdark, what we tend to say is that whenever there's a term that we use within mythography and stuff like this called iconotropy. Iconotropy is where anyone deliberately or accidentally misinterprets a myth for their own purpose. So there is an awful lot of that. And but Campbell's book is interesting because it's one of these things that turns a lot of people on to mythology. And I think myths are very good at, as much as mythology can be used for propaganda, it's certainly used in this country an awful lot. Myths also can show, as much as we have, the monomyth shows a commonality to a lot of elements of mythology. And I think it's if mythology is a good thing to study. I also thought science fiction was, for that reason, that we talked about things like race and gender and stuff like this. And science fiction is that one place where authors of all types get to talk about what they want and express themselves. It's science fiction's hard to put down. Sometimes the people would say that about comedy, but you can round up your comedians and shoot them, no bother. Science fiction books are often a form of dissent. We've seen this, for example, we have within the feminist community, we have a vast body of feminist science fiction right from the get-go that's promoting, feminism and promoting equality for women. We get the same thing with, gay rights within that aspect of science fiction. All sorts of things are a safe. Science fiction is seen as a safe place because it's not seen as real by the establishment. And I suppose one of my things that I was brought up on with 2000 AD, the comic, if you know anything about the history of 2000 AD, the comic itself used to be called Action Comic in this country. It was shut down by Margaret Thatcher and the Conservative Party over a story that featured football violence. The entire comic was rebranded and set in the future. Bob's Your Uncle back out a few weeks later, and untouchable. And it's interesting what science fiction can allow you to discuss philosophically and intellectually, and I've always thought it was a safe place for all sorts of people with all sorts of ideas and backgrounds. I don't know what you guys think. If anybody's still there, and I'm not boring you too much, I'll go on to 1 o'clock, folks, and then I'll hit the hay. Has anyone got any final wee point? I've gone off on a bit of a ramble, I suppose. Anybody got any other questions? Or the mythology and, I suppose, science fiction, by the way, and classical studies, they're both massive fields. One of the things I love about the classics is that you'll never read it all. There's no way I'll get any way completely through a half of it before, not even a tenth of it before I die. Science fiction's a bit like that as well. There's so much of it these days, and a lot of it's very good. A lot of it's a bit pulpy. A lot of it's not so good. But that's what Carl Sagan would tell you. The trick is, I suppose, to read the right books. So has anybody got any questions, folks, or on anything at all? Excuse me, gasping for a ciggy and a glass of juice. Thomas Carlyle, let me see. Yeah, mythologies. I suppose we've had a number of books on myths over the years that haven't been quite. Oh, wonderful! Thank you. Reminds me of Leo stress esotericism to his high dangerous ideas in plain sight. Yes, it's pretty much exactly what it does. And if you even go back to Lucian, who's Syrian writing in the Roman Empire, performing really more than anything, and he's a true history and a Caromenopaus are attempts to provide a critique on his own society. That we've got to stop believing this nonsense. It's not real, and look, let me show you a fantastic, and it's a gentle way of poking at the aspects of what's wrong in your society, and no worries, Grimdark, you're more than welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. So science fiction, I mean, Frankenstein in particular, I think is a very interesting book to look at in terms of, we can have, Brian Aldiss would present Frankenstein as a shift in science fiction, or the first science fiction book, I suppose. But it's got an awful lot of good ideas in it, and it works. Frankenstein's one of those books that works on different levels, but particularly, the last time I read it, I've only read it a couple of times, and I was actually telling one of my students not far back that I had taught Frankenstein an awful lot and had never read it, and it was actually time to get round to reading it. So I got round to reading it a couple of years ago, and I didn't read it from a science fiction point of view, kicked back and then read it from a feminist point of view, decided to approach it that way. It's a much more interesting read. It's a very good book. Actually, I very much enjoyed Frankenstein. You're right, Babs, thank you. Interesting ramble. We tend to go off on one. It's part of what I'm like, I suppose. Knowledge is knowing that Frankenstein is not the monster. Wisdom is knowing that Frankenstein is the monster. You're absolutely correct, Sean. And what a monster Frankenstein is, Victor Frankenstein. He's a shit. He's an absolute. Ugh. And yes, the monster, the creatures that Frankenstein is a villain. I believe he's a villain. At best, he's an anti-hero, but I don't think he's. I don't think he's the hero. I think he's a villain, very much so. If you know a bit about, then you get into Mary Shelley, and I'd argue that Frankenstein is Percy Bysshe Shelley, pretty much. I'm sure plenty of people agree with that. Um, but if you identify all the women out in Frankenstein and watch how he treats them, that is really it's quite, yeah, it's interesting. Dracula's a pretty good novel too, and that's those kind of books. Um, there's wee elements of science fiction to Dracula, I think, which is quite good. Moral myth, I suppose, yeah, things come and go in fashion, I suppose. The moral myth, it's a bit sad, I think, the idea of the moral myth. And there's something that detracts from cultures that where you have such a wonderful variety of mythology in the world. One of Mary Shelley's illustrators had a much different appearance for the monster than how presented in film. Well, yeah, I suppose we've recently seen Grimdark. I think we've got a few more realistic interpretations of the monster or the creature, haven't we? I think starting with was it the Kenneth Branagh one? But we've always had the bolts, isn't it, and the flat top, the Eddie Monster, or not the Herman Monster type look as I call it, but obviously it's the Frankenstein look. But yeah, that's I suppose the impact of cinema. Whenever you read a book, I suppose this is one of the things I think we who do we have on the other night saying we had somebody on last night saying they weren't going to see the new Dune film because they loved the old one so much. Aqua Baby, I think it was. I don't know if Aqua Baby's there. And whenever you read a book, I suppose you get certain ideas of what characters look like in your mind, and you might project your own imagination into your book. Whenever someone presents you with an illustration or a drawing or a film or any kind of visual medium of that, we tend to, it depends on how well that image is made, but it tends to lock into our mind of how we look at that person. So the image that the bolts and that flat top head, the whole thing. I mean, it's such an iconic look, but yeah, we're really looking for quite a tall, sort of heavy set man, really, with lots of stitches. And it's interesting. I think all the great monsters of horror are, if you look at them, they're all men. They're just people. And it's the same with science fiction. I think all our great monsters are just really versions of ourselves. You know. But yeah, that inversion of that Frankenstein himself is the monster. I totally agree. He's a real monster. Illustrators Grimdark are very important, I think, and particularly for some books. Some older books, in particular, have certain illustrators that really lend a sense of what they can be. And I particularly remember reading books like Robinson Crusoe and Tales of Robin Hood and stuff like that. And oh goodness, I think a lot of them actually were illustrated by a local artist to Northern Ireland. I'm trying to remember his name. I'll let you know if I can remember it. But how I always thought Robin Hood looked, for example, was totally informed by that artist from that book. There's a modern take that has the creation stalking Frankenstein. Can't remember title author though. There's a whole bunch of Boris Karloff is the popular depiction of Frankenstein. Yeah, and I love those old films too. They're great. They really are. I love that. What is it? Is it the Ed Wood films? Very good. But just the talk about Boris Karloff and all. Modern take. There's a whole bunch of stuff because the other title to Frankenstein, of course, is the modern Prometheus, and so you have that fundamental tie to that titan from Greek mythology. And depending on how you read Greek mythology, I suppose, but Prometheus is the creator of man in Greek mythology, and he's also the person that steals fire from the gods. But he's not the creator of woman, and the gods create woman, which is Pandora, and pass her down to his brother, who's Epimetheus. So Prometheus means forethought in Greek. Epimetheus means afterthought. Pandora, I believe, means all giving. Undertake. So yeah, sorry. The reason why I went there, Babs, is Brian Aldiss, I think, then started a bit of a trend. I'm not sure if the book that you're thinking on, because I haven't read it myself, but it's well known in the kind of science fiction world. It's called Frankenstein Unbound. And then, of course, it started a trend, I think, that we then have Dracula Unbound and the Wolfman Unbound and, etc. It's become a bit of a thing. But it's a nod to, there is actually a play by Aeschylus called Prometheus Unbound. And yeah, so there's a mythological overlay to Frankenstein that's quite interesting. But yeah, I was wondering if that was it, actually. Frankenstein Unbound, which is Brian Aldiss' book. What was the popular depiction of Frankenstein? I'm trying to remember the name of the guy. Is it Herman Gwyn or something that played Herman? Oh no, Ed Gwyn maybe, I don't know. Played Herman Munster. I always thought Herman Munster was the best looking Frankenstein, even though he wasn't Frankenstein, if you see what I mean. Sorry, Frankenstein's monster. Yeah, Frankenstein and Dracula, I think, and Sherlock Holmes are, I think, amongst the most filmed characters over and over again. So there we go. And Frankenstein, actually, again, there's that association with golems, I suppose, from Jewish mythology, and beings made of clay. He stressed on his dangerous ideas in plain sight. So there we go, folks. I don't know. Have you got any more questions? I'm running out of things to talk about, I think. But I could natter rightly if I've got a topic. But I'm off. You all have a great day. I'll tell you what, folks. That sounds like a good. We all deserve eudaimonia, a good spirit. We absolutely do. Thank you, Babs, and we'll see you tomorrow. I will wrap things up for now, folks. I think I know when to stop talking. We'll see you hopefully tomorrow night after the next episode for any questions and answers if you've got them. So have a really nice afternoon, day, evening, wherever it is. I'm all set as well. Yeah, Grimdark, I think me too. I'm gonna. It's pretty late here, and I'm gonna go see to the girls. My doggies need a walk. So thank you very much. I will take care, and you guys do the same. And we'll see you all hopefully tomorrow. If you've got nothing better to do, come join me for a bit of a natter. Thanks very much. Good night.